Good morning, Tallahassee. It's time to wake up War Chant on 97.9 ESPN Radio. Here's WarChant.com's Aslan Hajavandi and Corey Clark.
Hey, welcome into the program. You just heard some names. One of them needs to be amended. I'm Aslan. It's Wake Up War Chant. Ira Schoffel joining the program on this Wednesday. Ira, how are you, friend?
I'm great, man. Glad to be here.
Yeah. Ira and I are inside of a Volkswagen Passat. We're not sponsored by them. We're sponsored by For the Table Hospitality. Cruising on our way to Charlotte as we record the program for you. Corey Clark will be joining forces with us later on Wednesday. We'll have a full versions on Thursday and Friday. Will be fantastic. But we're on our way to ACC Kickoff. This is my first one, Ira. How many of these do you think you've been to so far?
It's got to be about 15 or 16, somewhere in there. I don't think I've missed one, and I started doing this in 2002 on the Florida State beat.
All right, so you'll show me the ropes. Let me know what I need to know. What do the people at home need to know? Like, what are we going to learn? Are there any storylines that you like? What are the 3 storylines that Ira's got himself circled? Or what do you hope to get out of this this 2-day excursion of ours?
Well, the first day, today when this airs, right, it will be the Coastal Division, which isn't really our bailiwick.
Whoa.
It's not really our...
What kind of metaphor is that?
That's not our main interest. Our main interest, obviously, is the Atlantic Division, which will come up on Thursday. But Commissioner Swafford's going to speak this morning. That'll be kind of probably one of the main highlight of the day, because John Swafford will give his kind of State of the Union address. He'll speak for about a half hour. He'll talk about some of the highlights of the year, where things are with the ACC network, the linear network, and kind of what windfall that's going to bring to the conference. And then people will ask questions for about a half hour, and he'll sidestep all those questions for about a half hour, deftly as he's wont to do. And then we'll go interview some players and coaches. So today, I think is kind of a good preamble for us, because tomorrow the Atlantic Division is going to be what our main focus is.
He can't duck it though, can he? I mean, it's happening, right? I mean, this ACC network is happening. Obviously, it'll launch this time next year, so I think it'll be a little bit more urgent next year, obviously. But there's really no more areas for him to duck off to. He's got to answer questions.
Well, and the evolution of this is for a few years it was always, yeah, it's coming, but we're not. We don't know when, we don't know what shape or form it's going to be. Last year was the big announcement. Okay, it is happening. It's going to be 2019, and it's really going to happen now. The issue right now that he's got to deal with is these numbers keep coming out with what the Big Ten's making, what the SEC's making. That gap is widening, and the question people are going to want to know is, how much of that gap is this going to make up? I mean, what he always says is he's confident that it's going to help, it's going to put a dent in it. He hasn't. When we spoke to him in the spring at Amelia Island, he didn't try to say, "Oh, this is going to completely shrink the gap," but it's going to get the ACC closer, and so people are going to try to get specifics. I think that's going to be the key, and he's never been willing to do that, and I don't think that's going to change this week.
So, if we're like, hey, Commissioner Swafford, Aslan on Hajavandi, WarChant.com, what's the expected windfall annual basis per school? We're not going to get a $6 to $8 million number, anywhere, no number at all. He won't do it.
No, and the best of what you'll appreciate about watching him in this setting is he's very good at, when he's getting questions he doesn't really like, he starts speaking slower and slower, because he's only going to talk for that hour.
He'll filibuster it out?
He'll filibuster the opening statement. You'll get a feel for how little he wants to talk if his opening statement goes about 35 minutes and then all of his answers are really long-winded.
Do you think coaches will, obviously the players aren't going to be that interested, but do you think coaches will have their ear bent to wanting to know what's going on with the network, or are they focused on game planning, man?
No, I do think some of them are. Every coach is different, but I definitely think they all know the deal. I mean, and they all know that the price of playing poker is going up. I mean, between these staffs, between the facilities, they all know that the lifeblood of their program is money to keep funneling in and getting all the things they want. So, no, I'm sure they'll be paying attention. Now, whether or not they'll admit that to us, is another question. But a couple of those guys are can be outspoken, so you never know. That's one thing that's cool about this event is you can dip over and kind of check out some of these other coaches, and occasionally some of those guys are a little bit more outspoken than other ones.
Maybe Paul Johnson. Should I be on Paul Johnson watch?
Could be. I usually try to take that, but if you want to give it a go, you can.
Fantastic. I'll see if I can get him to talk about that sort of stuff. So it is the Coastal starting things off on Wednesday. Thursday will be the Atlantic, home of three-time defending champs Clemson. In terms of division champs, Florida State is also in that. That's our Google Assistant giving us some tips on where to drive. So if you hear another lady talking, Ira is it's just Ira and I in the car. There's no woman. It's the Google Assistant. We'll get to talk hopefully to Mark Richt and Jason Fuente. We'll hear from both of them on the podium. For Miami, I guess we'll get to them later. Justin Fuente, have you ever talked to him before? Did you talk to him last year at the event? I'm curious to see how he'll talk and what sort of tones he'll talk about his offseason, because they've had a brutal one. I mean, David Teal from the Virginia, the Daily Press up in Virginia was pretty much admitting it. He can't feel too good about his team right now, right? Welcome to the Thunderdome, brother.
Yeah, I'm curious. We saw him at Amelia Island this spring. I talked to him a little bit at that in a group setting, and he didn't seem overly concerned, but things have kind of continued to spiral downward since then. So that may be different, but he comes across as a very self-assured guy. So my guess is he's not gonna let you see any signs of weakness.
Have you seen the photo of Mark Richt with a mustache?
I have not, but I've heard about it.
Creepy Mark Richt. Very creepy Mark Richt now, but we'll get to... Is he pretty open to the Florida State media? I mean, I know you guys didn't cross paths, but does he roll his eyes or give us a jaundiced look, as Jeff Cameron would like to say?
Well, Gene did. Gene was still here when Gene was
since '96. People,
exactly.
'96.
Respect the game. So he remembered. I think he remembered Gene, and Gene had him on Wake Up War Chant last year or the year before. I guess it was last year, and he certainly acted like he remembered Gene, and he was aware of War Chant. So. I think, but as far as, telling old stories or sitting and waxing poetic about his days in Tallahassee, I don't think he does a whole lot of that.
Done with that now. He's coaching the U. Let's shift focus now to Florida State. I mean, you mentioned it, the lifeblood of these programs is money, obviously, and the money is mainly coming from television contracts. And most schools now want to divert that money to these shiny facilities. You and Corey Clark and Jeff Cameron sort of bounce around some thoughts about the facility discussion on warchant.com, as well as the video on YouTube last month. Nothing has really developed here. I don't know if we have any sort of expectation that we're going to get anything. But right now, if you're the architect, or I don't know who you would be involved in this process, what do you find more intriguing for Florida State if they were to move forward with this, which they are going to, is just whether or not they're going to start from scratch or they're going to remodel the Moore Center?
Yeah, and I don't know that we'll hear anything definitive up here, but it's possible. I mean, I do think that they've continued to meet and discuss it and try to come to a better vision of a more achievable vision.
Did you just drop a hint right there? More achievable?
Well, we'll see. I mean, I think that was, obviously that was the big problem with the last, versions of the renderings or whatever. The wish list was not something that they felt like they could, the boosters could raise the money quick enough, and we turn this whole project around quick enough. So I think they've gone back and tried to figure out exactly what's more doable, and that's I think that those conversations I think are going well, and they're going to be resolved pretty soon. As far as how it takes shape, I don't know for sure, but I was in the camp with a lot of people for a long time that it needed to be a new building, and that kind of what Willie Taggart said, you don't want to just band-aid the Moore Center, and I kind of agreed with that. But I also think, and talking to people who have seen some of the possible versions of expanding the Moore Center, that there's a way to do that and have it be really special. I think the concern people have is that if you just renovate the Moore Center, it's going to be like putting a fresh coat of paint
right
on an old house. But I don't think that's the plan. If they did the Moore Center, it would be really kind of renovating it, not starting from scratch, maybe keep the bones of it, but really blow it out, and it could be a really impressive project. And the positive is it would be part of the stadium, which I think there are some real positives to that, because it would be seen by a lot more people. It would be a lot more visible than just tucked away behind the practice facility. So I'm more open to that than I was originally. I don't know whether or not Willie is, because he certainly didn't seem to be that way a couple of months ago.
It's always tough to ask you to think with other people's brains, and people are going to maybe think this is a slight at Willie, and I'm saying it's not a slight to Willie at all. By the way, we're going to have to exit in a mile, Ira, just letting you know.
Thanks, Google Assistant.
How much input should Willie have in it? I understand he's the head football coach, this is his program, but if you look at the life cycle of head football coaches, I mean, this thing is going to be around a lot longer, most likely, than Willie Taggart. I mean, how much input does he get in this process? I guess that's probably a really bad thing, though, right? If he's like, I want to stand alone, they're like, well, you're getting the Moore Center. That's probably not a good way to start things off, I guess, right?
The right way to start a relationship.
Yeah.
I mean, on the surface standpoint, you would say that you think a Jimbo Fisher, who's been in a program for 10 years, including his time as coordinator, and has won a national title, and ostensibly at the time, a year ago, everybody thought, okay, this guy's going to be here for the long haul. You would think that guy has a bigger vote than a first-year head coach, and especially a first-year head coach who hasn't really stayed at any school for a long period of time. So I can understand that on the surface, but I also think you kind of have to, if you kind of have to. I'm trying to use a phrase that's not a overtly adult. I was going to say, like, if you're in bed with somebody, you kind of. It's
a family show, Ira. Come on.
That's who you're with. So I mean, that's who they're with. I think that they have to kind of go with not what he wants, but certainly have to take that in strong consideration. So, I can see it both ways. I wouldn't say you mortgage the future and throw caution to the wind because of the vision of a first-year head coach. But I do think if things are 6 and 1/2 dozen to the other, I think you take it into consideration.
I'm of the belief, well, not the belief, my opinion, I think you renovate more. And I don't know how much money they would be dumping into. So just to backtrack, when President John Thrasher of Florida State University made the whole not exactly goal, whatever, got everybody's jimmies all rustled, fairly or unfairly.
Less than gold standard.
Less than gold standard. Was that
slightly less than gold standard?
To our understanding, was that for a standalone facility, or was that for the money that would go into renovating more and making it what they needed it to be?
I think there was two options, but both of them were over $100 million. And so, I think that, originally, you look at Clemson, they built their facility for $55 million, $60 million. Those are the numbers you're hearing. And so then when you get back these proposals for over $100 million, I think everybody just was like, what in the world? Yeah, right. The sticker shock was huge. So I don't think at that point, it just was it was almost like such a non-starter that, what was the point? But, I do think that, they'll come back now with a more realistic vision. And, look, I mean, these kinds of things, I mean, they're never, like you asked, how much of a vote does Willie get? Well, there's a lot of different people at the table. There should be a lot of different people at the table.
It's going to be like $70 million. There's going to be a lot of people involved to get that money raised.
Yeah, and so you have the athletic director and, his staff. You have the president of the university. You have probably the chairman of the board of trustees, Ed Burr, who we've reported that, he's going to be more involved in the process. And then you have, Seminole boosters, and the role of Seminole boosters in this discussion is they're the experts in the raising funds part of it. And, they give the input as to, okay, you want to build a $75 million facility or a $100 million facility. Okay, well, it's going to take you this many years. Like, we know what money is out there for us to, because they're constantly doing these, they know their pool of donors, and they know who's got what kind of resources and who's interested in donating to a project like this. And they'll say, okay, well, we can get to this over 6 years or 7 years. If you're fine waiting 7 years to build this building, sure, have your $100 million building. But if you want to get something done in the next couple of years, it's probably going to have to be this amount. So that's, part of the, so at that point, you assume, well, Willie Taggart, whoever the head coach is at the time, hears that information and says, okay, well, yeah, that is what I want, but I do want it to, it's more important to me to have something in a year or two than it is to have my dream place, or Stan Wilcox to have his dream place, or whoever it is. We need to make some concessions to get this thing done.
See, I feel like Florida State might have done that when they did the whole player lounge remodel thing,
Yeah.
and that to me is not a very top of the line sort of addition to the football program. It's a very nice thing, but I don't think there's a lot of, I think I maybe mentioned it with Corey before, I don't think there's a lot of schools that see photos of the players lounge and like, oh wow, that should be what we strive for. I mean, it's a nice thing to have, but again, I don't know how it works with money in terms of, if you can get somebody to agree to give you $1 million if you're the boosters, you got to take the money and let's get this thing going. You can't be like, oh wait, we'll come back to you in a year and a half when we think we got everything figured out.
Well, that thing, to me, that was a huge mistake, and that was an example of, not to put it all on Jimbo, but I'm gonna go ahead and put it all on Jimbo. He, they won the national title. They wanted to, they felt like they were woefully behind some of these other schools in terms of the look of the coaches' offices, the locker rooms, the player. They didn't have really a players' lounge, and so, it was kind of like, we need to get this right now. We need to do something right now. So they went out and raised several $1 million, and they put it into it, and it was impressive for kind of an overnight fixer-upper kind of thing. But if you had any idea that you were going to do this big picture football facility, then don't do that. Like, don't do that short-term fix if you're going to turn around 2 years later and want a $50 million facility.
Because, pause it real quick, I mean, if they were to renovate more, I would imagine that's going to be on the list as well, too. They're not going to be like, all right, we're going to pour $60 million into giving a football facility and making it the more, actually, we did that 3-4 years ago, their locker room, don't even worry about it. That's going to get overhauled as well.
100%, I'm sure. And, and I haven't seen the plans specifically, but yeah, there's no doubt. And a lot of things will be gutted and changed around. I mean, for sure the coaches' offices, because they redid those, and Jimbo got his new office with like 3 doors to get to it, and all this stuff, and it
very Dr. Evil-ish.
And it looks nice, but it's like part of the problem. That one of the reasons they need a football facility is because they barely had enough office space for the coaches they had. Now you add a 10th assistant coach, and then you add in all these quality control guys. Because one of the things that's happened over these last few years is they've added all these quality control assistants. Well, they don't have any place to put them.
Yeah.
So, and then they want space for NFL scouts when they come in, so they can look at film. There's a lot of things they need office space wise. So yeah, that whole thing's going to have to be changed around or gutted. That was a very short-sighted decision, in my opinion. But Jimbo's coming off a national title. I want something done here, something done quickly. They did it, but at the end of the day, I think that's going to look like a waste of money, in my opinion.
The more I think about it, I haven't been in the Moore building all that much over the years, but in the certain spots I have been in, it's kind of a tight squeeze. So I wonder if they're really, I don't know how much of the debate is the shiny new building versus fixing this up and making it the best it can be, or the fact that they're going to be constrained by maybe the Moore, is it even overall enough size to do what they want, the scale of a football facility?
The argument for doing it is there's 2 things that they can do that would really help. One is there is some wasted space. For example, the players' lounge. I mean, that's the biggest area.
What is that?
It's just a big warehouse. I'm
sorry, folks. If you saw it, you'd be like, what are we doing?
It used to be the turf room, and before that it was the rubber room where they used to do mat drills.
The sweet turf from the IPF before the IPF.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's like 40 square yards, but run some routes, guys.
40 yards of carpet.
Yeah.
And but that was where they would go when it was raining, and they would go up in there and do a little bit of whatever they could do. It was awful. But anyway, that's what they turned into the players' lounge. But now it's a warehouse. The players don't ever use it. I mean, the least that I've ever seen. There's a few pool table, a couple of video games,
arcade,
some couches, a couple TVs. It really, I mean, whatever. It is what it is. They tried to do something, but that's a huge waste of space. And then the other thing is there's a level above the in the end zone, above the coaches' offices, there's space.
That's the south end zone, by the way, everybody, where the Jumbotron is.
Yeah, underneath the Jumbotron, there's space for another floor. When they built all that, they did it with the idea that they could build another floor of offices.
All right.
And so there's some space they can use there. And then also just kind of, getting rid of the classrooms, moving all that out. I'm kind of curious about.
There's scholastic things going on.
There are, and so they would look to kind of remove some of that as well. So, again, but if you put, and I think they would build onto it. I think that it wouldn't just be the circle that is now. There might be a way to build like wings to the edges of the Moore Center, where you'd add actual spaces onto what's already there. So, I mean, from what I've been told, like that version, where you put $50 million or whatever it is into the Moore Center could be like super, super impressive. It would not be a Band-Aid by any stretch.
That's what I mean. I think Willie might have misspoke. I don't think Willie was trying to denigrate the fervor and the urgency that the university has to get him something. But I just feel like, especially, it's connected to the stadium. That's such a cool aspect, and not that the IPF or the football-only facility, which would probably be attached, I think, to the IPF, is a jaunt, like a big haul away from. But the fact that it'd be connected to the stadium, it's the crystal balls are right downstairs. Everybody, you want to go check them out? Go ahead. You want to check out the Heisman? It's right up over there. To me, that's such a huge sort of coup. And I'm not a construction guy. I'm not a contractor, but I would imagine $50 million. I know Jerry Coots has mentioned it before on the Tribal Council. There's certain things that you have to bring up to code when you do renovate a building that might not be cost effective, but I think they ultimately don't think that's going to be the case. But I just think $50 million into an existing structure will probably end up looking better than, say, $50 million into something totally from scratch.
Yeah, and like you said, Jerry, who's been with the Boosters for a long time, is in part of those processes and does post on our Tribal
Jerry,
Council.
have your people call our people. Let's get you on the program, man.
They do. Actually, Gene and I are talking to him, and we are going to set something up. But he's trying to explain that every situation is different. And if you're in construction, people who are in construction will tell you that you build a house here, it could be this. If you build it 2 blocks away, it might be a totally different situation because of different factors. So there are things to consider. But at the end of the day, I do like the idea of it being part of the Moore Center because of the fact you just mentioned. One of the problems they have right now is, all the the Heisman trophies, the crystal balls, all that stuff is, most of it's tucked away. They do have a few things exhibited in the lobby of the Moore Center, but a lot of the stuff is tucked away. All the bowl rings and all the bowl trophies and all that stuff. You go to some of these other schools, man, that's all on display. It's all, they also have up on the fourth, the coaches' offices, they've got, the
individual awards,
the posters, and individual trophies, the NFL guys, and all this stuff. And it's like, it would be cool for fans to be able to see that stuff. So again, I just think that it would enhance the entire experience. If it's over there by the practice facility, that would be fine, except for the fact that there's no real traffic pattern that leads you over there. Right. Like you're not going to leave your tailgate lot. Most of the tailgating's on the other side of the stadium, so it's not like you're going to pass that on the way to the stadium. So I just think, from a fan standpoint, it would be a lot, more beneficial to be closer to the actual stadium itself.
And I think there might have been some sort of belief that, maybe not belief, but maybe actual tangible proof that Jimbo wasn't very into integrating the football team with
the general population.
Yeah, so maybe he would have been in favor of being away from things, but hopefully maybe Willie would be more willing to see the value in being attached to the stadium and being close to other things like that.
Yeah, I mean, you would think. Certainly the way he has interacted with fans between his booster tour and then the whole slapping high fives at the spring game. I mean, certainly has seemed to be like he wants the fans to feel like they're part of the program. And again, that's another way to do it. There's two sides to it. On the one hand, you'd say, look, you'd like the student athletes to be part of the students, and you'd like the team to be part of the fan base, and everybody kind of commingling. On the other side of it, that is one of the problems with the Moore Center the way it is constructed right now. And like you kind of scoffed at the pesky classrooms, but that's one of the problems they have right now is there literally are classes taking place, feet away from the meeting rooms where the team's having like their meetings before practices, and players are going to get taped. And, it's a weird situation where you've got, say Cam Akers is having an issue, and, the running backs coach wants to take him out into outside of a meeting room to talk it over, and then there's like 4 kids sitting waiting for their class to start. It's just a weird thing. On the one hand, yeah, you want the football team to be part of the student's body and part of the university, but it also can be, this isn't 1974. I mean, it's big business, college football, and there are some times where they need to be kind of secluded.
I hear you. All right, well, moving along to other topics and matters. Ira will have his ear to the ground, obviously, on that about the football facility. You're going to be the guy who's going to break it, Ira. I got faith in you on that. We got plenty going on warchant.com this week. We're obviously, again, on our way to Charlotte. I'm Aslan. He's Ira Schoffel, managing editor of warchant.com. Willie Taggart, head football coach. This will be his first ACC kickoff, obviously. There are some stories that you guys have been working on. I know that'll be going up on the site. I think you and Corey both got something cooking. What is the sort of the story that you've been working on here with Willie when you were able to sit down with him over spring and be one-on-one?
Yeah, the story,
group, I guess, was the Warchant team.
Yeah, our group, 4-on-1, I guess it was.
Take that, Taggart.
4-on-2, because he had his Derek, his SID was there. But we, so Corey had his first story go up yesterday. I put up a story that will be up on the site this morning when people hear this. Put up late last night about how impactful his time at Western Kentucky was into turning him into the coach he is today, and just kind of interesting. He talked about how as a high school, and he's spoken in the past about how as a high school football player he really wanted to go to Florida State. He would have loved to have come up to FSU with Peter Warwick, his childhood friend, and get a chance to play at this level, but FSU and schools like that didn't recruit him because he was too small. He was, I think he said he was about 150, 155 pounds, something like that, when he was
all heart though.
Yeah, all heart, and had a lot of things going for him, but size was not one of them. And so ends up going to Western Kentucky, and he talked about that recruitment, but really, that kind of, really opened the doors for him to have the career he's having now. It's kind of one of those things where at the time he probably felt like this was the worst thing in the world. He's got to go to Western Kentucky. He can't go to Florida State or a school like that. But in terms of what it did for his life, it ended up being the best thing. He got to coach for Jack Harbaugh. He became best friends with Jim Harbaugh, ends up coaching for Jim Harbaugh at Stanford. They're still the best of friends. Jack Harbaugh is his mentor. He meets his wife there, so we talk about that. Corey's actually got a little story, kind of a little funny story to go with my story about how he met his wife and kind of their courtship, and it's pretty entertaining. So kind of looking back at that period of time and how important it was, and then probably later today or first thing tomorrow, I've got a story going up about why he wants to be the first African American and first minority to win a national championship in football. And he talked about how important we just drove
construction. We're okay. We're living. We're still alive. Everything's all right.
We just passed some construction here on the highway, but it's he talked about how when John Thompson led Georgetown to a national championship in basketball, that really it inspired a lot of young minority basketball coaches to believe, hey, that's possible. Not only could I get a head coaching job at some point, but at a program that can win a national title. And he feels like if he could do that at Florida State, win a national title at Florida State, it would not just open doors. He feels like doors are open now for minority coaches, but he feels like it would inspire a lot of young people to believe that that's even possible. So, and I think it's a rallying cry on this coaching staff. Odell Higgins talked about it back earlier this year. I know a lot of the assistant coaches talked about it privately. They want to win a national championship for Florida State because it's their job, because they really want to do it at Florida State, but they also want to do it because of what it would do, for aspiring minority head coaches.
Yeah, it's always again a clumsy thing for two white guys to talk about. What it would mean for a minority population to see an African American head coach win a national title. But I think even the folks who are turned off about hearing race mix into their sports. I mean, if you read Ira's piece and if you watch the companion video piece that comes out with it, I think Willie's very open about, the challenges that are out there for minority candidates, but there's also opportunity. And rather than see things as him having to work uphill, he's found opportunities out there, and he just hopes to be able to capitalize it here in Tallahassee, hopefully.
Yeah, and I think that's the point he made repeatedly, as you said, and that it's not as if he feels like the doors aren't open. He feels like the doors are open, but the key is you got to take advantage of it. You have to know what to do. These jobs are very important. I mean, it's not just a cool title or a fancy office. Like there's a lot on the line, and you have to come with your A game. If to steal a bad pun, as we go to the ACC kickoff, you have to bring your A game to these interviews. And not to spoil everything, I feel like I just spoiled your entire story, but no, it's fine, buddy. They'll still want to read it, and that'll be up at warchant.com tonight or tomorrow. But and then Corey had his story yesterday, which I'm sure you spoke about yesterday. But in case anybody missed yesterday's show. He
didn't talk about it.
He didn't talk about it.
Corey's not. He's not a braggadocious guy. He's not a braggart. He doesn't like to talk about himself a lot. Ira.
He needs to work on that. But Corey's story was also about kind of how Willie Taggart learned the first time he actually interviewed for the head coaching job at Western Kentucky. He was 25 years old, bombed the interview. He was not ready for that interview, as you just talked about being ready for your opportunity. Jack Harbaugh recommended him to be interviewed because he was a coordinator, and Jack Harbaugh loved him. He bombed the interview, didn't get the job, but then really spent the next 7 years focusing on getting better, really having a vision, figuring out what his plan should be, and then working on it. So when he got the opportunity again when he was 32, he got the head coaching job at Western Kentucky and turned that program around, which really set his career in motion to have the job at Florida State.
I feel so inadequate when I hear that. 32 years old and head football coach. 32, I don't know. I was in Montana and I was in Mississippi. Whatever. Bowling Green, Kentucky, Jackson, Mississippi. Eat your heart out. You speak of the Harbaughs. I'm a huge Harbaugh guy. And I mean that sincerely and genuinely. I'm a huge Harbaugh guy, especially Jim. It was tough to see my children fight in the Orange Bowl a few years ago. I didn't know what to do with myself. But the media guy dropped yesterday, and there's obviously a section in there devoted to the head football coach, Willie Taggart, and there's a section called What They're Saying About Willie Taggart. And there's several luminaries, whether it's Derek Brooks, whether it's Tony Dungy, the Super Bowl winning head coach John Harbaugh, part of the Harbaugh clan. But there's a quote, Charlie Ward's also in here too. There's a quote from Jack Harbaugh that says, that Willie has a very creative play-calling mind. Jim Harbaugh says, Willie has a great technical mind for the game of football and is very detailed. I like reading these things, Ira.
That got you happy.
When I hear the Harbaughs speak glowingly about my head football coach, I'm on board. I don't want it to be 47 days away from kickoff. I want to go right now. I'm pumped. I'm excited for it.
Just going at a faster pace didn't do it for you. You need to know that there's a plan. There's more to it than just being basic and fast.
Well, yeah, I mean, when you just hear about speed and tempo and everything, you're like, well, is that
if that's all there is, then why
the whole crux is we're just going to go fast and catch people off guard because we're going fast. Well, I hope everything kind of melds together and makes sense in the end, which ultimately it will. It will. We got faith. We got confidence. There was something else I wanted to touch about as we get ready to land the plane, as we're about 50 miles outside of Charlotte. Again, it's Ira and Aslan. It's Wake Up War Chant. It usually is on 97.9 ESPN Radio, but we're just coming to you straight in a podcast form. So live it up, enjoy it. I did mention the media guy. Maybe there was something I wanted to riff off of that. Nobody's got a single digit yet. Everybody's still got double digits. Nothing's changed on that. James Blackman is listed at 180 pounds, a robust 180 pounds. I think that's a good number. I would assume. I almost had a false alarm in the car as we were looking at it. The cover had several players, and there was actually a player with number 1 on it. And I'm like, oh, James Blackman's on the. Oh no, it's Levante Taylor. It's Levante Taylor. So there's no depth chart on there. Nothing's changed in regards to obviously the quarterback battle, but that's something that maybe we'll figure out in the days ahead as we end up getting to speak to Willie Taggart.
When do you think he will announce a quarterback? Because like on the one hand, like everybody loves Willie. I mean, he's Mr. Popular since he took the job, but he clearly is never going to talk about injuries because all spring he would not talk about anybody.
He got very uncomfortable when we would ask him.
Anybody, like didn't matter what you asked, any way you asked it, he was not talking about injuries. I'm wondering, and then you get this media guy. The media guy comes out yesterday. It's online. We'll get the hard copies up in Charlotte that's online now, there's no depth chart information. There's no hints of any sort of sign of how position battles or anything like that. Who's coming into camp ahead of whom? Just kind of curious. I mean, how long he's going to keep that to the vest?
I'm going to try to figure out a way to elucidate that. Not elucidate. That's clearing something. To sort of elicit that answer from him, rather. I mean, I guess the question will be from me to him is that you're a quarterback. You keep talking about the importance of leadership at that position and how it bleeds over to all parts of the team. So how important is it for you to let that guy be known by his teammates and get this thing started? He'll probably deflect and be like, well, they'll know. The players will know when they see it. They'll know. They won't have to hear it from me. They'll see it with their own eyes. But that's going to be kind of, I think Corey says sometimes I ask gotcha questions. It's from my time in TV where you have to get like a good 20-second soundbite. You can't let somebody go on a 3-minute sort of soliloquy, but that'll be my way to hopefully figure it out.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good approach. I think that the answer you gave was, I think, what we've heard from Jimbo in the past and those things. And yeah, you're right. I mean, on the one hand, like, you get it. You want to compete, and so you have 4 weeks of preseason camp. You'd like to give those guys a fair shot, but at the same time, you know, it would be nice if somebody was in charge. I mean, I do think, you know, Blackman, to me, from a personality standpoint, just watching those two guys, I mean, Blackman last season, DeAndre for 3 years now, DeAndre's always been much more about DeAndre. You know, he's not...
Whoa, what's that supposed to mean?
Not in a negative way at all. In terms of practice, you know, he's not the kind of guy that is going over to everybody else and worrying what everybody else is doing. He's very focused and businesslike on him and getting himself ready, getting himself prepared, his arm, his getting into a rhythm, throwing, getting it, you know, his footwork. I mean, he's very focused on himself. It's kind of cool to watch because he's very. It was cool to watch, especially kind of coming off of pretty soon after Jameis, because Jameis was so loosey-goosey and fun and going over and joking to everybody and all that. It was kind of interesting to see somebody be very focused and serious. But where Jameis was always like kind of going over to other guys and inspiring other guys, DeAndre really didn't have that. Plus, he was a young guy. He was only a redshirt freshman on a team with some older guys, so maybe he didn't fit into that. But I've never really seen that from him, whereas Blackman has a little bit more of that Jameis personality where he goes over and talks to other guys and has that more of a kind of a bigger personality. Well, you know, if a week or two into camp, if DeAndre's playing better, James isn't going to stop being that personable guy.
Yeah.
So that would be interesting to see. You know, if James doesn't, if DeAndre's out playing James, does James continue with his personality, or does he back down because he realizes DeAndre's winning the job?
Yeah.
Or, you know, that's going to be an interesting dynamic because, again, just because of their two personalities.
Well, again, I mean, I think that's a very salient point. I think Willie has been so high on James Blackman. I'd be very surprised if he did shirk or shrink in that sort of moment. That if he feels it slipping away, I would hope that he'd be a guy that would kind of double down, because Willie seems to hold him in pretty high regard. I don't know, not so much maybe his sort of ability to be a quarterback, but just the way he carries himself, his personality. You know, Willie seems to really sort of have an endearing, thought or opinion on the way James Blackman is. So I would hope that he wouldn't back down. Corey mentioned on the show prior, as we counted down the top 40, we went over his specific top 40, not the composite that was compiled by you, Gene Williams, Corey, and Jeff Cameron of ESPN radio fame. But Corey put them 5 and 6 on his list. I think DeAndre 5, James Blackman 6, and he was at 51% DeAndre starting, 49% James Blackman. You want to give me like a percentage, or like, do you remember where you had them on your top 40?
Yeah, I mean, I had DeAndre like 5 or 6, and then I had Blackman 16.
Oh.
Because I was, I just felt like, you know, I feel like we got to pick one or the other.
Way to take a stand, yeah. Way to take a stand.
I may be wrong, but I know that they both won't be in the top 5 or 6 most important players.
Right.
One of them will be, one of them won't be. So, you know, I went with Francois. I'm not, you know, in the spring, I kind of felt like, you know, listening to the way Willie talked about Blackman and some of the things you mentioned, how much he likes his leadership ability, how much he likes his personality, all those things, that all, you know, resonates and makes you think, okay, he's going to be the guy. But if all that's there,
if that's what you're hanging your hat on in a competition, you're
if that's all there and the play is there, then it's a no-brainer, right? I mean, like DeAndre, DeAndre played pretty well for a redshirt freshman. I think he showed some really good signs, but has never been a big positive in those other areas.
Yeah.
So, what would get if Blackman was where you wanted him to be on the field? He's an A+ in every other area. Then it would be, to me, it would be open and shut case, since DeAndre is still coming back from the injury and he's never been a plus in those other areas. The fact that it's still kind of 1A and 1B, to me, makes me think that they have more either belief or confidence in DeAndre. And the other thing, going back to 2 years ago, we can't talk about last year because DeAndre got hurt, but, Jimbo loved DeAndre's potential. I mean, when the reason we all knew DeAndre was going to start over Sean McGuire in 2016 was because if you talk to Jimbo on or off the record, it was very clear he loved DeAndre. He loved the potential. I don't know if you remember that spring game in Orlando where Jimbo...
The one where Malik Henry outperformed him?
Yeah, but Jimbo did everything he could to kind of prop up DeAndre.
Oh, yeah. Oh, he fumbled? It's okay. Go put the ball back.
He was down.
Give him another opportunity. Everyone's like, oh, the clutch gene, he's got it. Like, what do you mean he's got the clutch gene? But I remember that.
But he did. I mean, and when you talk to him, so I think, and from what I've seen in practice, there are times I've seen in practice, DeAndre, I really think he can play really well in the right circumstances. And I think that offensive line, he got beat to crap in 2016. I think he didn't understand the offense totally, and Jimbo didn't do a great job of kind of simplifying things, just like he didn't do for Blackman. So I think there might be a lot more to DeAndre than we realize, which would elevate him over Blackman. And then if he just takes care of these other things, he's the guy. So that's a long-winded way of saying I still feel like DeAndre is going to be the guy, but there are some variables there. Obviously, if he's not 100% healthy, we'll have to see when camp starts if he is. And then the other thing is, he's always kind of been on the edge of being in the doghouse or out of the doghouse. And I don't know if that's ever solved.
Well, you mentioned the fact that it's a 1A, 1B situation, which bodes well for DeAndre. But, I mean, at this point, new coaching staff, is there really anything that James Blackman has done where they could just say, he is number one, DeAndre? I mean, wouldn't that be handing him the job almost prematurely if they went ahead and said that at any point up to now? But
I don't know what's wrong with that, unless you're just trying to keep DeAndre from transferring. I mean, I don't know why. If James Blackman was a quarterback you need to run your offense, you saw him during bowl practices for 3 or 4 weeks, you saw him in spring practice, you got to coach him, and he's, I mean, from everything we've heard and been told, players love him, great work ethic, great character. I mean, everybody likes him. If all of that's there and he's the guy that can lead your football team, why not name him the guy? Like, what's the, I mean, every other position, guys know who the guy is. I mean, he's taking Cam Akers. I mean, he's taking Cam Akers to ACC Kickoff when he's got Jacquez Patrick sitting back home in Tallahassee as a senior. So I don't think he's worried about players' feelings, unless he thought DeAndre might transfer. Now that may be in the fact that they don't have a lot of depth there, obviously. So maybe that was a concern, but
I like conspiracy theory Ira in the Passat right now,
just
man.
The more I think about it, the more it's like, well, why not go ahead and give it to Blackman? I mean,
right.
If you really believe he's the guy, so I'm starting to think that maybe he doesn't think he's the guy and thinks DeAndre. And then when you add into it, we kind of forget that DeAndre did look, good. I mean, he may not have been perfect as a redshirt freshman, but think about, how did you feel about DeAndre after that?
Oh, no, I've said, I think yesterday on the show, DeAndre's season looked much better than the season that we saw out of James Blackman.
Yeah.
But there's some different variables in place. I mean,
he had Dalvin Cook.
He had a coach who wasn't checked out mentally. I mean, Corey said he had healthy receivers, but the receiving core has been pretty meh.
Yeah, I mean,
James Blackman had Ermon Lane for a game, right? I mean, Ermon Lane was full defense 2016, so I mean, DeAndre didn't have that.
Yeah, I'm not saying Blackman, can't get the job done. I just think that Francois, to me, seems like more of a playmaker. I don't know. We'll see. Blackman looked pretty good against Southern Miss.
Right.
And I'm not.
I mean, Francois had good moments trying to lead the team back against North Carolina, which they should have won that game in 16. The last drive, I feel weird giving him credit for Michigan because he played lousy that Michigan game. But when he needed to make the throws, he made the throws.
I thought there was a really cool moment that we never really got to write about last year because he got hurt so early in the year. But, at the end of the Florida game, when they beat Florida, he must have played pretty well in that game, right? I mean, I can't remember
in 16? Yeah.
After that Florida game, he, DeMarcus Walker and Dalvin Cook went up into the stands. They stood on the railing, I guess whatever you call it, the barrier up to the stands, and they stood there with the students, and they all both kind of just basked in the adulation from the students after that win. And it was kind of a passing of the torch. But here you had DeMarcus Walker, who was a senior, you had Dalvin Cook, who was a junior but was going to be leaving, the star on defense, the star on offense, and the other guy up there with him was this redshirt freshman quarterback. It felt like the passing of the torch. Yeah. And you don't do that unless you really believe in that guy. And I just think that it felt like at that moment, man, this kid's got a chance to be the star of this team. And there was even chatter of him in the Heisman. And it's like he gets hurt. He didn't, bad second half of that game and gets hurt.
Putrid. 3 picks, right?
And then he's had these off the field, things, and you've heard talk about how he wasn't a good teammate. He didn't show up for that game and all that. But if you
high school Harry,
if you think back to what he was at that point in time,
right?
To me, that guy at that point in time versus what we saw from James Blackman, it's not that close of a comparison, I don't think.
I need to see flat top Francois back.
You gotta go back.
Got to cut the braids, the little whatever. Those aren't even braids, but just go back to the flat top and look really sharp, and then I'll probably come back on board. Last sort of question to ask before we go, and it deals with the quarterbacks, and it goes back to the whole 1A, 1B thing. Isn't it the belief, though, that I know DeAndre's not going to win this job on points, right? I mean, if this is a stalemate, doesn't Blackman probably get the edge? I mean, Francois is going to have to land a knockout to win the job.
Yeah, I agree with that. I do agree with that because again, like we talked about the intangibles. I think the thing about Blackman is, you're not going to have to worry as much about. I think as long as DeAndre's at Florida State, I think Willie and the coaching staff is going to have to be wondering, is he going to make another mistake? Is he going to make a dumb decision? Is he going to do something selfishly? Is he going to do something that drives us nuts? And DeAndre's not that elite of a talent where you're going to put up with just craziness. He's not, Randy Moss or whoever, where you're just going to be like, okay, we have to have this guy. So, that's always going to be a little bit of an issue, but I think he has to be much better. And I think you'll see how it plays out in the practices and the scrimmages. That is where I do agree with, your mock comments from Willie Taggart about, the team will know. I think the team will know. And that was the point I tried to make in that War Chant video we did with Gene and Jeff and Corey the other day when we broke down the top 5 was, Gene made the point that the players really like James Blackman, and that's true. But I also think they like winning and they like guys who score. And so as these practices go, if DeAndre's full speed, if his team is consistently the one that's moving up and down the field, his team is the one that's consistently beating Blackman's team when they scrimmage, they're gonna certainly start liking DeAndre a whole lot more.
Can you wait to start? I can't wait to start charting practices. Francois went 7 of 9 with the first team. Blackman went 3 of 8, and everyone's like, "Oh, here goes Francois! Watch out!" Can you feel it? Are you ready for it?
Well, those were the good old days when we got to see a lot more, and now it's a lot more.
We're probably not gonna get to that.
Yeah, it's a lot less detailed as they used to be. But I do think that there are things you can pick up, and that's one of the cool things about, not cool things, but from a interesting standpoint as a media member is we definitely got to the point where we kind of knew Jimbo's key buzzwords and things his
tells.
Yeah, his tells, exactly. You kind of knew what those were, and you could kind of read between the lines. You could ask about a player that you thought was doing well, and then he might say something and be like, okay, well, I'm dropping that. He has no interest in that. But we don't know what those things are with Willie. And so I think that's going to be interesting to see how quickly we can read into things with all the positions, but certainly the quarterback battle and how he describes things and whether or not he gives anything away.
47 days away from Labor Day, kickoff against Virginia Tech. Tech will be at the podium. We'll have a reaction from them up on warchant.com throughout the day. And then tomorrow, the Noles will go at ACC Kickoff in Charlotte. We'll have you covered, and by we, it's a whole bunch of us. Myself, Ira Schoffel, the managing editor of WarChant.com, and senior writer and columnist, your favorite, everybody, Corey Clark. We'll all be there in Charlotte hanging out. Hey, Ira, thanks for driving this whole way, man. You got that trucker blood in you. I'm proud of you.
It's what I do, buddy. It's what I do. And
steady hand.
And I did want to tell Corey I love him back.
I
know I missed those a few times.
Oh.
And there's no chance he's going to hear this because there's no way he's going to listen to me and you on a podcast. No offense to you, but me on a podcast. But I do love him back.
All right, well, everybody at home knows where Ira's heart is, and that's all that matters. Thanks for listening, folks. We'll catch up with you later.